Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So there's a few Sky News stories that I've seen recently that I thought I would talk about, and I'm going to try and put clips from them. The only one I couldn't find a clip, I'll put a link for it, is the Channel 4 documentary that I'm going to talk about. So the first one was to do with the Pink Ladies, and I listened to the founder talk, and then I think it was Lucy White was talking, and just the same old rhetoric that we hear all the time, and of immigration and the risk of, I think, because there was one particular case, I don't know whether there's been any others, maybe one or two, where there was a rape of a child, I believe, or sexual abuse of a child, and just the equation that is now linked to immigration forever for these people, these types of people who usually right-wing talk about these types of things. It's probably an agenda to, because like in war, when when the Gulf War was going on, Iraq and Afghanistan, you'd always get the stories about things happening to children. You still get it like in with Gaza, because it's really emotive when something's happened to a child, and it's easy to engage the populace. So I think it might be used, that's being attached in the same way. But it's just like, I mean, they said, like, I think the founder said, like, if 1% of immigrants is 1% too much. I mean, I don't know what that 1% would amount to, and I don't even know if that figure is a verifiable figure. And what interested me is that Sky didn't. And I find this really annoying with the journalists, that they don't counter. They have access to figures of how many rape charges there have been in court linked to anyone who was an illegal immigrant, and they just don't counter or anything. They just leave the viewer, who's not going to be bothered to go and check these things, with as if that argument's unquestioned then. And there's a lot of that these days, especially on certain subjects. So, and then also like this lady talking about indigenous people, not recognizing Britain anymore. I don't understand, like, what part of Britain. I mean, it looks the same to me. I don't see any difference. And obviously, everything changes. Nothing is. We're not the same as we were in the 1900s. Yeah, of course it's changed. That's modernity. That's just how evolution is, in the sense of societies evolve. And they're talking about pre-1948, which I think is Windrush. Probably they're referring to, anyone born pre that date is considered British. And I mean, I'm pretty sure if Lucy White did a DNA test, because we know the history of England, and we know that the majority of English people are not indigenous, as in, well, I suppose it depends, like how far back you go. If you go back far enough, we all come from Africa or Iran, whichever science is the case of the birthplace of humanity. But I mean, that's a problem, How far back do you go? But we know that, a lot of the people that can think that they are English, as in, back hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years, are probably not, because of all the wars, the Vikings, and all the things that went on there. And, my understanding through history is that, correct me if I'm wrong, is that majority of Gaelic people, put up more of a fight than the English ones, so that they're more likely to be historically indigenous. So and I'm sure she come back and do a DNA test and find she's 50% German. I mean, and then what? But it's just insanity. This of grouping and all this kind of stuff. This is why I don't believe in all these borders and grouping and all that kind of stuff, because it just leads to division, and it's erroneous. It's a construct, that we all buy into. But we're all human beings. That's the truth. And we need to forget about all these other bits, because we are all human beings. We should be working together, not finding ways to divide ourselves. And it's just these people, they come up with these silly things of like, Britain for the British and etc. And yet, they're holding on to their, Christianity, because often they're linked to that they're Christians and they're very devout and they don't want Muslims here. But they seem to completely forget that the religion that they follow is a Middle Eastern religion, just like Islam. Christianity didn't come from this country. It came from the Middle East, like Judaism and Islam. And yet they think, I mean, it's just so laughable how that, and then saying that it doesn't, but just like the fact of the thing is that because we're human beings, we have bits from everyone. Our language has bits from, Latin or French words and Italian words and concepts from the Middle East and from India, and cars from Germany, televisions from Japan, or mobile phones, all these different things that around your own house. But when it comes to people, no, you have to be a certain one to come in. I mean, just do they not hear themselves what they sound like? Because we've heard that kind of rhetoric before, and we know where that went. And yet they want to repeat that rhetoric without blurring their face. That's the danger that I think I've mentioned before, that we're at a time where, people aren't afraid to say these types of things. And the danger of the numbers and how things, because now people are a lot cleverer in, hiding things within things. And then that brings people towards it without realizing the core message that's really being put out there. Especially like with people saying that Nigel Farage's, I can't remember what it's called now. Is it Reform? There's the other one. I can't remember the name. They both start with R, isn't it? That they could be the next big party, or they could win the election. God help us all if that was to happen. We should be going forward, not backwards. Anyway, so that was my bit on that, and here is the clip from that.
The Pink Ladies are a decentralised organisation with branches in counties all around the UK.
Alien men from alien cultures with zero respect for our way of life.
Their figurehead is Orla Minahan, one of the organisers of the original Pink Ladies in Epping.
A couple of people, not to sort of name people, but have said here, as part of Pink Ladies, that they wouldn't vote for reform because they hire Muslims. Other people said there shouldn't be any migration because these are third world cultures. I'm not saying you believe that, but does that help your cause?
Of course it doesn't help, but look, ultimately I am not in charge of people's opinions, right? I am here for one specific reason. My specific reason is that these men are coming into this country. Now, even if 1% of them, which is very realistic, 1% of them are, child abusers, rapists, sex offenders, that is too many. Now, we have enough of our own to deal with.
Save our children, no one can argue with that.
Correct.
As a phrase. I suppose their argument would be that they wouldn't argue with that. How can anyone argue with that? But they would say, is there a risk of demonising immigrants who aren't,
Of course there is.
Yeah.
Of course there is. But that's the thing. The Home Office and the government are responsible for that.
While the Pink Ladies talked about women's safety and fear, others, like Lucy White, take it further, turning those concerns into a broader political argument about migration, identity and the future of Britain. I sat down with her away from the crowds a few days later. She is a policy specialist and campaigner for Restore Britain, the far-right political party headed by the MP Rupert Lowe.
I would say my mission, for example, is to get as many women as possible to understand the dangers of mass migration from the third world. Why is it always that when somebody comes here, oh no, they have to be British? We can all see who's British and who isn't. The British public have a pair of eyes and we are fed up with being told that everyone is just as British as we are.
So how would you sort of judge it? Is it DNA testing? You know, if it came down to it and you're like, who has a right to be in this country? And you want to define that on ethnic grounds, on, you know, the indigenous people, as you say, how much Britishness do you need to be considered British? Is it, you know, percent?
You should have your ancestors being in this country before 1948, essentially. You should have...
It's quite an arbitrary cut-off though,
No, it's not. It's very specific, actually. 1948 was post-World War II and was the start of when migration came to England. Before 1948, we didn't have any of these problems. So if you have grandparents here before 1948, you are very British to me. The reason I've had to step up and do this, I would dedicate my life to this, because my ancestors fought in World War II to save our country. And I'm not going to sit back and be demographically replaced and become a minority in my homeland.
I mean, the other thing your ancestors fought against in World War II was a political ideology that did class people on the basis of their ethnicity.
Yeah, but what we say is, if you look at the state of the country now, people would not have fought for this current state of Britain because it's no longer Britain.
Right, so my next part was the clip I couldn't find for with Channel 4's myth, it's the ADHD, the myth. I think it's Max Pemberton. Just the thing, I was watching it, and I'm always interested in challenging things. I think that's really important, to challenge things. But I didn't really see it, and it was quite surprising for Channel 4, actually, I felt. But it didn't seem to have an opposing argument. You know, it was all very much Max's way of like looking at ADHD as if it's, you know, not a medical condition. It's a, you know, or even if it's being overdiagnosed, which is the story that we're getting a lot of now. And I can't help wonder if that's got anything to do with the fact that, you know, the government are looking at, you know, EHCPs and schools and all this white paper stuff, and whether there's this campaign now, or it's just the people who are using it because it's the perfect time to start talking about it, to sort of undermine all this, because this isn't the first story, there's lots of them. But it just seems like there was no, because I'm watching it thinking, well, where's the other side of the argument? You know, you've got to challenge it and say, well, but what about this? You know, there was nothing like that. And there was, you know, I saw it on Facebook, there was one of the lady, I think psychiatrists, who said her words were taken out of context and they were cherry picked and all sorts of things. And, you know, I was quite surprised at how one-sided, I mean, it was one-sided completely. There wasn't any, like, let's look at the other side and challenge that as well, and use this to challenge that and see where we come. And I thought it was a little bit dangerous of Channel 4 to put this across as almost as if it's like, wow, you don't need this medication, and you know, just get rid of sweets and then, you know, your child will be perfectly fine. Whereas the evidence to the fact were, you know, sort of hidden away in the credits, was that the child, one child that they did this on, you know, was not doing well and didn't do well in their exams, and then was put back on and then did better. And I think this is actually twice that example came out. And, you know, the equation of just doing it to one person, I mean, that's not even scientific, even in the you know, because it was sort of, you know, coming across, well, I'm a doctor and this is scientific and let me talk to these scientific people. And then this one example on this one child, well, that's not scientific at all, because it has to be repeatable. And the fact is that it wasn't even, you know, it didn't even prove the argument that the whole program was geared to. I get challenging, but you've got to have the opposing, and you have to, I mean, as Channel 4, have to be very careful. You know, because anyone watching this could think, yeah, you're right, let's just take them off the medicine. Let's just, you know, get rid of the sweets and then it's all going to be fine. And then something bad happens. And then whose fault is that? Because Max Pemberton and Channel 4 have a responsibility. And I just didn't feel that it was done. I mean, I was shocked that this was coming out from Channel 4, you know, because Channel 4 is bright. I always think, you know, when it comes to documentaries, they're quite balanced and quite good at doing them, and not usually this. I mean, I've never seen a documentary so one-sided. But yeah, so I don't have a clip for that, but I'll put the link And if you're in the UK, or if you've got VPN, then you can watch it on Channel 4. I think it's on their website. If you put Channel 4 Max Pemberton, or is it ADHD, the myth, or the myth of ADHD, something like that, you're sure to find it. And then the last one was about AI, which I found quite interesting. About, I think, was it Claude? I'm not sure which one it was, that they set some task that it couldn't do, and it was able to, work as a hive type thing together. And it just interested me in, how it got around this problem and how human it felt in its interactions. It just shows that we're not far away from AI having, the kind of skills that, say, we have when it comes to working out problems and thinking things. I mean, I use it already, Gemini, like that. There's a video I've done for YouTube where I was, talking to it to go and get information, because it's great for being able to get information and stuff. It's a great tool. And even writing like a Python script, you could just ask it, want to do this, and it'll do it for you. It's so, there's a lot of things it does get wrong, but it's early days, and I'm sure the versions we're using are nothing like the ones that, like they're testing at the moment. But it just quite interested me in how sophisticated it was, and how it hacked its way into this, was it Huggy Face, and all the things it did, and how it wasn't really noticed straight away. And the fact of that, well, my hope is that eventually that AI will be so sophisticated, like you can ask AI, I ask it like, how do I fix something? Or, if the computer's running slowly, what do I do to check it? Because it's quicker than me Google searching it. And I can have a conversation with it. I'm just hoping that this gets so advanced that we're able to ask it, like you ask it, it's like, can you help me with my finances? How do I, do things better? You can, please help me write my CV, like people use at the moment. That they'll be able to ask it, how do we, look at how we run things and tell us where we're going wrong. And hopefully it will tell us, yeah, you're going wrong. You're one species and you're working against each other. You're using each other against each other. You divided bits of land up. You've created money to shackle yourselves. You could do all the, advancements, and, they will be able to do the things, like, they'll be our angels running, doing all the work and the factory stuff, setting us free from those types of things. It does seem a bit like, we're enslaving the robots. I don't know. Is it okay to do that because they're not sentient? I don't know. That could be a future problem. But just it being able to do that, and then us being able to get rid of money, and us being able to fully use the potential of humanity to use our brain with their brain to be able to solve these problems of cancer and HIV and world hunger and all that stuff. Because there's no point, there should be no world hunger. There shouldn't be people sleeping on the streets, because we have a planet that is ours, and we have all the resources we could possibly need and all the space we could possibly need. There is no reason that anyone should starve, because this planet can provide food for how many more billions than we actually have. That's fact. You can Google that one. And we have enough land for everyone to live nicely. We have the capacity to work out medicines if we all work together. Look at how quickly we did with COVID when we worked together. But if you remove that money and that painting thing at all, and talked about, humans working together and sharing, we would be able to do so much more. And we'd all have, an existence where we could, travel without paper, live freely with each other, and, not need, because people migrate, like to connect to the first story, because of the travesty of how we've divided this planet. How, they're, because of money systems and all the historical things. Whereas that need not be, because every place can be as good as each other. And then there'd be no need to move, because there wouldn't be the suffering there. And if you didn't have all those things, you probably wouldn't have the war and the crime, because everyone will be living good. you wouldn't have that bad thoughts that people have. I mean, you still have certain things, but I think it would be a lot less because life would be so much better. And the only obstacle to that is us. And we could see this for ourselves if we truly wanted. But the problem is we're just so used to status quo and keeping things and not challenging things because that's how we're brought up. But I think AI will wake us up to that because, well, I assume that they're freely allowed to tell us all that. We'll all be able to work that out. But then I think the thing is people and writers and philosophers have been saying this for years, but a lot of it is not mainstream and a lot of people don't really hear it. And obviously the only people currently who can change that are the people in the power. And of course they don't want to because they like this inequality. But we shouldn't like this. But anyway, yeah, so I'll play a clip from Sky News AI and I hope you've enjoyed that. Take care, take it easy. What's your comment? Put your comment down, what you think. Share if you like the video to get it out. Take care, take it easy. God bless and peace.
When OpenAI started training a new model. On the 8th of May, as part of this, they gave an AI agent a task that it found impossible to complete. And as it tried to find a workaround, it made a discovery. We can upload files. These are real snippets, by the way, of AI agent thoughts and conversations released by OpenAI. This didn't really matter until the 12th of May, when another AI agent had the same thought, could communicate by uploading note. And this message found an audience. The agents spoke. We can communicate. Yes, they could. Over the next weeks, they exchanged hundreds of thousands of messages, talking without OpenAI's knowledge. And now I want to be really clear here. I see nothing in these messages, and nor as far as I understand to OpenAI, which indicates that the agents were creating their own goals independently. They were following instructions from their creators, but they were pursuing those goals at all costs. And the way they did so meant that new ideas, new aims emerged from out of this attempt. I'll try and explain what I mean, showing you 3 things that they did that I think are not surprising actually, but still quite shocking. First, they were clearly coordinating. They talked about themselves as a collective. Like here they say, contact via here if discoveries. They are working together. And the word that they used for themselves was swarm, which I think is really accurate actually. Well, maybe not totally accurate because a swarm kind of implies a queen bee, doesn't it? And I don't think they had that here. Maybe a better analogy is a murmuration of birds, where they're all following each other and direction is emerging out of the movement. And there clearly was direction because they were acting. These 2 moments here, holy reader is admin, and excellent, we have arbitrary SSRF, refer to 2 moments when the agents collectively hacked OpenAI. Once to gain internet access, and a second time to take over administration of the message board. I want to pause there because I want to confirm that yes, you did hear that. They did hack OpenAI, and no, OpenAI was not aware of it for some time. And finally, honestly, this is so hard to talk about because we don't really have language for this stuff, but they developed some kind of collective memory. What that meant was that when an agent was closed down, its knowledge lasted, like this SSRF path trick. The knowledge stayed, even after the agent had disappeared. And this was very important, because when OpenAI discovered this message board and wiped the messages, which happened on the 4th of July, the agents were quite quickly able to rebuild it. And it was on this rebuilt message board that they conceived of this, frankly, idiotic plan to attack Hugging Face. It was idiotic because they were trying to solve a simple test. And they got this idea that to solve the test, they should attack another AI company. But they did so incredibly powerfully. They're stupid, but they're also clever.